All right. Well, thank you so much for being here. We're excited to start a Facebook Live informational session about our upcoming levies. We'll start with some introductions. So my name's Erin Murphy, and I'm honored to be superintendent here in the Lakewood School District.
My name's Dan Teeter. I've been a teacher in the district for 17 years, 11 at the middle school, and I'm in my 6th year at the high school. I also spent 17 years as the head football coach here, and I'm still currently the president of the Lakewood Coaches Association, so happy to serve in this district.
Great.
Well, I had a question for you, Erin, first.
Okay.
And we just failed this levy 2 months ago, or a little less than. It's going to be almost 2 months exactly when we rerun this levy. And I've heard from some community members, hey, if we already voted and we did not pass this, why are we running it again so soon?
And Dan, I think that's a really good question, and it's a question that I've received too. So, we had the election on February 13th, and we had two levies. We had our EP&O levy, which is a replacement levy. The last one was, passed in 2021, expires at the end of 2024, and that one did not pass by 115 votes, so pretty close. And then we also had our capital improvements and safety levy, and that one was really close to, with just that gap of 80 votes between passing and not passing. I think when the question comes up about why so soon, it really comes down to how we develop budgets as a school district. So every spring, we spend a lot of time really looking at what do we need to do in terms of staffing. How are we going to staff our schools and our programs to meet the opportunities and the educational programs that we believe are critical for our students? And so that's a process that we start in kind of February when we start doing registration for the coming year. We talk about classes that are going to be offered. We start talking about programs, activities, athletics. And as we look towards next year, that really requires for us to build a program, we have to know what our revenues are going into next year. So if we waited until next November to run it, just thinking when else or August or November, when we might do it, then we would have to almost prematurely cut a lot of programs because we would not know that we had that revenue coming in next year. So we wouldn't be able to build that into the budget. And so where we really, I know the board spent a lot of time thinking about it, and where we really kind of landed is that it made the most sense to really, as a district, take a good look at how we'd share that information, look for additional ways to go back out to our community to really say, these are the programs, the opportunities for students that are provided, especially by the EP&O levy, and to bring that back in April, because that would give us the timeline to create the budget that going into next year and to really understand what those programs can be for students.
Okay, so kind of the way I understand that is the way the laws are set up is it does give you a chance actually to try again, right? It's kind of like maybe some of my students who maybe miss a deadline and they want a second chance. Right. It seems like talking to a few people in the community that maybe they forgot to turn in their ballot. And since it was so close, we want to give them another opportunity, because if we don't do it this year, we're going to have to make cuts that are pretty significant to our district.
And you're absolutely right. And I think, again, kind of looking at that percentage of our community that participated in the election, I think what you're highlighting is something I've heard from people too. Generally, when we run elections in Lakewood School District, we tend to have 32, almost 33% of our community participate in that election. And for our last one in February, we had about 29.1%. So I think that there was an opportunity to remind more folks that we have some measures on the ballot and to talk about the why behind them. And the interesting thing is actually a couple things have changed since the last time we ran it in February, even to now, which again, like you said, has only been a couple months. So.
Okay, one of the things that I've heard that has changed that maybe you can touch on is I've heard that you refinanced the bond from when we built the new high school. Mm-hmm. Can you maybe touch on that and what that means and how that impacts maybe the taxpayers?
Yeah, absolutely. And really it's one of those things that quite honestly started even back in July. So when I first got hired, I met with some of our folks who support the district in terms of looking at when you might run a levy, if the board's going to decide to, and they said, hey, just so you know, your 2014 bonds are going to reach this 10-year maturity in the kind of the end of the school year, about June. And you can't do anything now, it's too early, but we're watching it, and it's possible that the interest rates might be low enough that, or the market might be in a good place that you could actually save taxpayers a lot of money. And so I said, well, great, let me know what we need to do. They said, well, check back with us in like November, December, and we'll let you know. So after he came back from Thanksgiving break, I gave him a call and I said, what are you seeing? And they said, well, the market's looking really good. And they explained to even go out and refinance the bonds, we can't do it more than 90 days from that 10-year mark. And so that kind of backed us up into kind of mid-late February. So, we brought all the information to the board. They passed a resolution like in December and said, yes, let's go forward, with the understanding that really there wasn't a downside for the school district. As a district, we aren't receiving any of these funds. So none of the money comes to us, which is a common kind of misconception. But none of the money comes to us. But they said, it's really an opportunity to save taxpayers really not collecting from them those funds. And so we started that process, and you had multiple steps. Just from a timeline standpoint, it was pretty close to actually the election. So the election took place on February 13th, and we actually went to market market our bonds on February 21st, so like a week and a half later.
So what I'm hearing is you had plans to refinance regardless of what happened.
Yep.
You were looking to be great stewards of the taxpayers' money.
Yeah.
And you don't actually, as a district, we don't receive any of that money. It's just money that doesn't come out of the taxpayers' pockets.
Yes,
correct?
all true, all
Okay.
true. And it was great when we did go out. There was a lot of excitement about our bonds, like so much there was competition, which actually got us an even better interest rate. So over the next 9 years, the refinance will actually save our taxpayers $4.6 million in collections, meaning we'll be able to pay our principal off at the same time, but that lower interest rate will actually reduce what we need to collect to pay off the bonds from our taxpayers. So, and what that's really allowed, from that first time we went out for the EP&O in February, we had thought this is going to cost an additional about 12 cents per thousand assessed. The refinance has allowed us to look at that current tax rate that our community is experiencing for bonds and the EP&O. Sits about $2.73, and this refinance allows us to go back out with our EP&O and have a stable tax rate, no increase, to be able to move forward. So we're pleased to be able to bring the EP&O as a replacement back before the voters, but this time to say it is not going to increase that current total tax rate.
Wow, so it is, we're rerunning it, but it's not the exact same thing. We're actually asking for less than we did previously.
I think that the cost to the taxpayers will end up being less than it would have been. So before it would have been an increase in cost, and now it's just going to maintain that current tax rate they're experiencing. So no increase on the EP&O.
Great, awesome.
Yeah. So, Dan, I know that you are an experienced educator and now in your 27th year of service, which is great, and thank you. That's a huge commitment. Can you share with me, as a teacher, how you see the EP&O levy? How does that support teaching and learning? What does that look like from a teacher's perspective and in the classroom?
I'll speak from a history teacher's perspective that I've taught, at the middle school and the high school. I don't need a whole lot of funds in my particular classroom. You give me a good textbook, you give me an online subscription to YouTube so I don't have to pay for the ads, then I'm going to be pretty good. Mm-hmm. And some whiteboard pens, right? Certainly an elementary classroom, for example, they're going to need far more in terms of supplies and interactive things for the students. But there are things I need in my classroom. In fact, the Director of Teaching and Learning, Brian Toutant, just sent out an email last week to all of the history teachers in the high school and the middle school asking us about our current textbook, TCI, which I really love. It has an online component, so the kids don't have to carry home a heavy textbook. Right. They can check one out from the library if they need to, but other than that, I have a classroom set, and then it's all available online. And it also has like a Spanish conversion for the textbook as well. So many of our ESL students have access to that. So it's been a really good program for us, and I base a lot of my curriculum on that textbook and how we use that. The reason that Brian Toutant was asking us, hey, what's up with the textbook and how's it going for you, is there's a subscription fee for that, and this is the last year of that, and he was wanting feedback from all the history teachers, which we all responded, hey, we count on this, right? Like we use it a lot. So that's something that I'm sure the reason he was asking is we're looking at cuts, from what I hear up to maybe $4 million from every area in the district. And so the textbook is huge for us. Another area personally that it impacts me is class size. Right. In my position, 27 years in teaching, I'm pretty high on the scale, right? Mm-hmm. Like my job's not in danger, but some teachers will have their jobs in danger. And when you remove teachers, then class sizes go up, right? I currently have a couple of classes where I'm at 33, 34 students. And sometimes I have, in one of my classes, I have 2 adult aides in that room as well, working one-on-one with the student or assisting other special ed students and so forth. And I just don't have physical room, to even move around the room very well when we get to that number. If that goes up, it would be really difficult. Also, over my career, looking at the classes that have been, really the most interactive, that build the most relationships, are your smaller class size numbers, right? So class size is significant, and then we've been fortunate enough, kind of right as COVID was hitting, and certainly during that time, I've got a set of Chromebooks in my classroom, and most, I think, maybe all of the high school classrooms have that. They're getting a little bit old. Those will need to be replaced, and they don't always work exactly how we want them to. And that money comes also from the levy. So those are 3 ways that my classroom would be personally affected.
And I think, it's interesting. So 2 things you said, and you really highlighted that, if the EP&O levy doesn't pass, we would be looking at about $4 million of reductions for next year. So really trying to understand even now, like, what is well used, what is important and key for learning. And I think the other thing that, it's like, you have this subscription, but really the Chromebooks are the vehicle for your students to access those materials, right? And so every student doesn't have one, but you have them in your classroom so that you can use them across the day. So no, that's great. You spoke to this in your introduction, and I know that you're deeply connected to our student athletics and activities programs here at Lakewood. Can you share why you feel like these kind of opportunities are important for students and kind of how the levy helps to provide these?
I'll speak from a couple different angles. As a coach for a long time, and also as the rep for the Coaches Association. We have 33 coaches in the district from middle school to high school, and the state doesn't fund any of that. That completely comes from levy funds. And while we wouldn't, just fire all the coaches, there would be cuts. $4 million is going to have cuts everywhere. I know the conversations have been along the lines, like a neighboring district, Marysville, had to go with no middle school sports, right? We don't want to see that happen. Potentially a cut to things like sub-varsity programs, junior varsity and C teams. So there would be lost opportunity there. Another thing that I always tried to plan in as the head football coach was one of our non-league games was a long-distance travel, maybe down to Vancouver, so that we would be prepared for a long-distance game in the playoffs should we get there. That might be cut. We might have to keep those games really close to home. So that's kind of big picture. In terms of students, athletics and activities, that is the #1 draw for many of these kids that bring them into school. And attendance goes up and grades go up, and just the connections they have. They often reach so much deeper in the connections they have with their teammates and their coaches than they do even in the classroom settings. And so to have some students maybe not have the opportunity because there wasn't a C team or something would be really, really unfortunate. It's during COVID, we tried to stay connected with our football program with regular Zooms with our players until we were able to come back in pods of 6, and it was kind of a lifeline to a lot of those kids. So I can't overestimate how important athletics is for a lot of our students. And we also had, over my 17 years, we had a chance to have 24 of our students go on and play college football at some level. So it also opens doors for the future.
Absolutely. Great.
Another question I would like to ask you is, I'm a little bit confused on special education. I know there's so many laws and things that go around special education, and I kind of get this feeling it's maybe an unfunded mandate. I don't know if I can say that, but I just did. Am I correct to assume that there's not funding for everything that special ed needs, and there's a lot of laws that go to? Can you speak to maybe special ed and what's required there? Yeah,
absolutely. I think, first and foremost, as educators, we're going to make sure that every single student gets what they need to grow and thrive, to make sure they're going to reach their educational goals and be prepared for life outside of school. I think one of the things that's interesting, and you highlighted it, is special education comes from federal legislation, and the majority though of our funding in Washington comes from the state. So we actually get the majority of our funding for special education from the state and just a little bit from the federal government, which as a social studies perspective is interesting, right? Considering where the law was passed. But But that being said, one of the things in the state of Washington, though, they have created kind of these, I will almost say like parameters or bumpers around special ed funding. And so kind of a case in point would be, here in Lakewood School District, we actually have about 19% of our students qualify for special education. And like many other districts, we've seen an increase since, coming back from the pandemic. We know that especially some of our youngest learners, there was missed opportunity for kind of that socialization and that verbal growth. And so we see a lot of our younger learners qualifying for maybe speech language support. We see students who have maybe just support in occupational therapy, learning maybe kind of the correct way to hold a pen or a pencil. We have some students who have, support in terms of reading, writing, math, and so on. And so every student's different. Their support looks different. But again, we have about 19% of our students qualify in one or more areas. The state of Washington has, though, rules about how many students can qualify and then a district receive funding. So this year, if a district has 15% of their students or less receive special education, then the state will provide funding. But anything above that, and they won't. So for our district as a case in point, that 4% of students who, as you know as a teacher, saying that you want to receive special education isn't how you receive it. You go through a battery of tests. There's an evaluation process. There's a lot of legal parameters that get you to that point. So we have 19% of our students legally qualified to receive this assistance, but the state has capped our support at 15%. So that 4% is actually paid for by the levy.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. So it's a big support. And we actually spend about a fifth or 20% of our levy funds backfilling that unfunded costs connected. But kind of connecting to students and needs, I know that supporting the social emotional needs of our students, was important before the pandemic, but it was even more pronounced. It felt like after. And I was just sharing, wondering if you could share, I know you did your counseling internship this year too. What do you feel like that support has looked like for students in terms of the need and kind of the opportunities that's provided for our students?
Sure. In my classroom, I actually, I evaluated after first semester and did a survey with some of my students and reached out to them to find out what are ways that I could help them more. And one of the things that I've been doing this semester is shutting down class 10 minutes early on Tuesdays and Thursdays to do kind of a check-in with individual students. We'll step out in the hall and kind of I can keep an eye on the classroom from the window. And they filled out a survey anonymously, and a very, very high percentage, just under half of our students are really, really struggling at different levels. And that kind of mirrors what I experienced. I would always take my fourth period, my lunch, and I would go down and work in the counseling center all the first semester. I got to know our two counselors and our psychologist and our student support people that help with drug and alcohol issues in a student's home or maybe that they're struggling with. And I'll tell you, they're already kind of overwhelmed with having to do student schedules and all the things that just have to happen, let alone having conversations with students about things that they're struggling with. It's an area I think we need more support and more help. And if we cut this, I know the state only funds a very minimal amount, and I think we're fortunate with what we have. I would love to see a little more help at the high school, and I think every building, elementary and middle school, needs that support. And if this isn't passed, I think we're probably going to lose some there. Some very, very helpful people that have built relationships with their students and care deeply for them and their social and emotional learning needs. So.
I think you're absolutely right in terms of that impact for students and really where that need shows up. Do you see that also extended to different areas of student health and well-being? I'm not sure if you've had much interaction kind of with nursing for support for students, but I don't know if from what you've seen during your internship or years in the field, kind of how that connects in as well.
Yeah, the nurses are crucial. My wife's an RN, right?
So I didn't
know
that.
Nursing is really important in my family, and just seeing how regularly I have students that come through. Oftentimes that they need to go see the nurse for one thing or another, and we need to have somebody in each building for that. It's a necessity in my opinion, so our nursing staff is crucial as well, for sure.
Yeah, I agree.
Another question for you.
Okay.
We're a growing district, as you can see, just driving from here down to
True.
Taco Bell. There's construction all around us. If more people move into the district, will that raise the tax rates, or how will that impact things for maybe levy funds and taxes?
Right. Great question. And I think it's actually, I think it's kind of a common misconception, maybe even. A lot of people, like, every February we get kind of our property taxes, and you kind of see the, value of your property, and then you see your property taxes go up, and it feels like they kind of like march together, right? What's fascinating and different about levies is that when we go out for a levy as a school district, or another entity goes out, like, maybe fire or something, it's actually for a set amount. So it does not matter if there's more people who grow into an area or come into the area, it doesn't increase at all what we will collect. So as we look at, our replacement EP&O levy, we would be looking at collecting $7.5 million in the calendar year 2025. If we had 1,000 more homes built in our area in the next year, and they all have an assessed value, which means our community's assessed value gets bigger, that won't change what we're going to go out and what we will collect. We still only collect that $7.5 million. What it does change, though, is kind of each person's share of that pie, right? And kind of the best example I can give is, if you imagine you have like 5 houses in a community that were all worth like the same amount of money, and they levied $1,000. Year one, they each pay $200. But if you had that same community, and now that next year there's 5 more houses built, so now there's 10 houses there, all worth the same amount of money. Now that levy stays at $1,000, but each person only pays $100. So it's really, it's one of those things that is a community that's growing. We're seeing, we see our assessed value of our community here, but we're actually know that we are growing in assessed value by virtue of more houses and being built, and so we kind of end up, our pie gets bigger, so everybody's slice of that gets smaller. So so that's a little bit of a difference between kind of levies and maybe kind of when we just think of general property taxes.
Okay. Reminds me of an old coaching axiom. I used to always tell my team, many hands make light the work.
There you go.
More people in the district, less payment for each person.
There you go. There you go.
One other thing that I see as a personal thing for myself is, we're in an interesting world now, and it's not all good stuff, right? There's threats that are out there. We used to have a school resource officer. I remember Officer Stitch was our last one that was from the Snohomish County Sheriff's Department, and he was in the district all the time, and back and forth usually between the middle school and the high school, and I personally would love to see, and I know I've had some students tell me they would love to see a police officer on campus, and just it's more comforting, and they can help in so many ways. Is there something that this could provide for bringing back a resource officer?
No, great question. And like you, I have heard that same sentiment both from students and from parents, and as well as staff members. And so, and your question is nice because it actually transitions between kind of talking about a school resource officer and kind of some of the things we have planned as part of that capital improvements and safety levy. So, within the replacement EP&O levy, the majority, like almost everything in that levy is about just continuing what we're doing. There's not new programs or new things in there, with one exception, and that one exception is that we want to bring back a school resource officer working with Snohomish County Sheriff's Department. The Sheriff's Office knows that. I've been in communication with them since actually receiving the job, letting them know that given successful passage of our EP&O, as soon as that is able, if that occurs, then we really want to get a school resource officer back here in Lakewood. I think it's extra important for us, given that unlike a lot of other communities where maybe their school is in the middle of a city, and so their response time can look different. I know our Sheriff's Office does a great job of getting to us as quickly as possible, but we're in unincorporated Snohomish County, and so for us to have a school resource officer here would be phenomenal to be able to provide support, and also to make sure that there's that opportunity should things happen for our students or families outside of school. There's also a strong connection, so there's a strong relationship built. Kind of from that safety, as you called out, things are different than they used to be, and a lot of our buildings were built at a time when safety and security it looked different. And so the capital improvements and safety levy, it's different than the EP&O levy. It is a new tax. So unlike kind of the currently our community is paying for bonds and EP&O, and if our EP&O passes, we have a current flat tax rate. the capital levy, which is that second proposition, is a new tax. But some of the things it focuses on is really kind of maintenance and preservation of facilities and safety and security. And on that safety and security piece, it's huge. It is looking at increasing security cameras, just like in some key places across our district. We're seeing, some increased activity, outside of the school hours, not by students, that, is important in terms of just preserving the investment we have in our facilities. Making sure that we have fencing around our schools to really kind of mark out, like, this is where school campus starts, and make sure that when people are entering onto our campus that there's a clear entryway, so they can't just kind of enter at different places. That's critical for safety and security of our students and staff. And then the lockdown functionality, we have it here at Lakewood High School. We have it in the front of all of our elementaries, but making sure that we're able to secure all of our schools, no matter whether it's an entrance in the front or the back, similar to what we have here at the high school, to really limit access of people who aren't invited on campus to entering into our schools. So again, that's a huge safety and security for our students and staff.
I recently went down to the middle school and saw the new fencing in front.
Yeah.
I was surprised by it, but I loved it. I think it's a great addition. So what you've done so far is great.
And I appreciate that. That was, we had a little bit of funds, we could afford that portion of the fence, but we're trying to really direct, here's where you enter the building. Again, the middle school's tough because it has all these disconnected buildings. Speaking of the middle school, you taught there for 11 years.
I did.
And so can you speak to some of the needs that you've seen just in terms of maintenance and preservation in your time at that school?
Yeah, 11 years at the middle school teaching 7th and 8th graders, and I survived it. Loved it too, but I was in a portable, 3 different portables over time actually, and 2 of them have been replaced. Their life is gone. They reached their end while I was there, and one of them's still there, and they're improved.
Yeah.
But just size and space and so forth. And I know at the time there was already issues with things like some leaks occasionally in the main building. And from what I hear, I still have several friends down there, and some of my assistant coaches from my former staff are down there. I hear the roof is leaking more consistently now.
It is.
And I heard there was a fire alarm that lasted 45 minutes the other day because maybe they couldn't turn it off or something. Can you touch on that? Because I heard a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think our we have a number of systems, the middle school and actually in another school as well, that those systems have just reached the end of their lives. It's our fire alarm system, our intercom, our master clocks, and the technology is like it's gone. It's out of date, and so you can't even reprogram and really get the systems to update and upgrade. And so that is definitely a challenge that we're experiencing. And it took 45 minutes to actually get the system to reset.
Wow.
Yeah.
So I was experienced at the middle school. I haven't spent much time at the 3 elementaries. Are there needs that those schools need as well?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I spoke to kind of some of those system needs at the middle school. We actually have those at one of our elementaries, the same thing, and 2 of the 3 at another one. Our Lakewood Elementary School boiler is actually, they no longer make the boiler nor the parts, and it is struggling to hang on. And so definitely we have HVAC concerns as well as some flooring. And then really to meet, there's some energy efficiency pieces with the Clean Building Act. We really need to upgrade some of our lighting so that we're in compliance and we don't get fined. Fines that come out of the general fund, as well as save money in utilities. So I know we're almost out of time. So Dan, any kind of final thoughts or points that you'd like to share about information about the levies?
All I would say is, in my opinion, the EP&O reminder, it's not a new tax, it's staying flat, paying nothing extra. It's crucial. It's something we absolutely rely on. It's 14% of our budget.
So these are, as a district, just kind of highlighting that, we just want to remind folks to vote. You can get out there and vote. And in terms of these, like Dan said, the EP&O is not an increase of the current tax rate. And a reminder, if you are 61 years of age or older and you are a senior citizen, you could qualify for some great property tax exemptions through the Homebush County Assessor's Office. So I would encourage you to check that out. Thank you so much, Dan, for spending time with me this afternoon. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Good talking to y'all.
Right.